Hi crafters, it's Kathy here with Scrap and Bean. I'm going to show you a technique today that I'm going to call the stained glass technique because that's the look that I was going for, was to make these cards look as if they were like stained glass. The idea is really this coloring where it is shading, where it's darker in some areas and lighter like in the centers or even on the leaves. You can see where it's dark and then light. So I'm going to show you that technique as well as this overall look of stained glass. That's just two of the designs. There's several and I'll show you some of those at the end. So the design itself, this poinsettia design and the bird design are actually a die cut. So you run your die cut through a machine like a Big Shot or similar and get these. This was with the black velvet paper. I have one here where I have die cut it on gold cardstock foil. You can do it on regular cardstock as well. So I'm going to use this one today as the example of how I made these. It's a few steps to this process, but they're quite easy. We're going to use some just plain white cardstock. Then I'm going to layer on top of that some double-sided adhesive. I like to use Sukwang because it's nice and strong. And then the die cut. A couple tips along the way. So here is our white paper on the adhesive. I'm just going to take this protective coating off the back. Now you do want to be careful to not put fingerprints in here because that will change your final result. You'll see fingerprint marks. So I'm keeping my fingers right on the edges, which is going to be hidden behind the edges of my foil. In fact, I'm going to take this and lay it down in the adhesive. There. So step one, we've got our cardstock and the double-sided adhesive on top of it. Now I'm going to take off this top protective coating. Normally we would peel this off and throw it away, but we're going to use that for one more step on this technique. So here I'm peeling it off, and instead of throwing this away, I'm just going to set it aside. I want to hang on to that because I'm going to use it one more time. Now this is all sticky, and again I want to be careful not to put my fingers on there because it will change my final outcome. So now I'm going to take my die cut, and you can see this obviously needs to be trimmed so it's even all the way around, but for this portion of it, it's nice to have a little extra on there. So you do want to make sure that when you lay it down, this whole area with the open space is going to have adhesive behind it. So here, you may not be able to tell on camera, but my adhesive ends right here and my cardstock keeps going. So I want to make sure that that piece of adhesive is still within my frame. So I'm just going to lay that down on there. And around the edges is okay to press. Now you will notice when you're doing this that some of these very fine lines of the die are still standing up. If I tilt this, you just might be able to see that some of those are still raised. And excuse me, I do want to have those pressed right down into my adhesive, but I don't want my fingerprints on there. So this is where the tip comes in. This protective coating that we pulled off, we're just going to lay that back on there. And it's obviously not going to stick to our adhesive because it's just a protective sheet. Now I can rub my hands all over here, making sure that all of my die cut is in contact with the adhesive, and yet there is no chance of getting fingerprints in my adhesive. Now I'm ready to throw this piece away. And you'll see that the die cut now is all nicely pressed down into my adhesive. So now what we have is this piece of gold cardstock die cut, and all of these what looks like a white areas is sticky, all sticky. So anything you put on there is going to stick to it. I'm going to take this tray here and I'm going to use a microfine glitter. This is actually a see-through glitter, or it's called a highlight, so you can see through it. And I'm going to very generously pour this over my whole project. I'm not wasting any of it because I'm going to capture it in the tray and then pour it back into my jar. But I am going to cover that whole piece. Tap off any excess, and I even like to knock it off. We don't want any loose glitter. We want just the glitter that's actually adhering to this. So I will brush off anything that's extra. And then you can recapture that in your jar and use it again. So you can make a lot of cards like this out of one of those jars. Now with this glitter on here, I'm going to do what they call burnishing. It's really just a fancy name to mean rubbing your finger all over your project. And what happens with this is any of the oils on your hand actually bring out some extra sparkle in that glitter. It also presses the glitter right down into that adhesive so that it's going to stick really well. So rub off the excess. Now when I work with it, there's going to be no loose glitter coming off of there. The reason that is because the glitter I'm using is a microfine, so it's tiny, tiny, tiny little granules of glitter, and the adhesive it's sticking to is a very strong adhesive. So those are the two things you want. If you don't have the brands that I'm using, make sure your adhesive is very strong and your glitter is very tiny, the little granules of glitter, and you'll get that result. Now we can go into adding some color on here. Here's the one that's finished, and you'll see on here, hopefully you can pick it up on camera, that if you look at the red of the poinsettias, there's darker areas and lighter areas. Same with the green leaves. On this other card that looks more like a sky in the background, you can see that in some areas that blue is very dark, in other areas it's very light. So to get that color as well as this nice sparkle, I don't want to cover up my glitter now with something dull. I'm going to add more sparkle to it. And my choice with that is to do with the Wink of Stellas. The Wink of Stella brush is a pigment and it's got glitter in it. So because there's glitter, when you store them, the glitter will settle. So I give it a really good shake up to get that glitter moving around again. And in this case, I'm going to make them red poinsettias, and so I'm using my red as well. The real trick here is to have a white. So both of those are shake. The white one also has glitter in it. So what I'm going to do is start by coloring wherever I want it to be the darkest. In this case, I want the center of the flowers to be the darkest, and I want the color to fade out as we go to the tip of the leaves. So I'm putting my red down in the center, and hopefully my hand isn't hiding what I'm doing here so that you can see. I'll put down a generous layer of red just right in the center, and then I'm going to go over with the white. This is also Wink of Stella, and I'm going over top of some of that red and pulling out. So I'm really just dragging that red out farther, and I'm adding the white to it, which is also lightening it. And you can see how that's really lightening it down. So that gives me this nice variance of some dark red and some light. So hopefully you can see that on camera. I got to learn a little bit more about the lighting here on my camera, but hopefully you can see that. If you've decided that your red isn't dark enough, you can go back in and add another layer of the red. If you wanted to, you could just color it all solid red, but I like the look of that red fading out. So I'm just going back in again and fade it out with the white one. Now in this case, because I'm using foil cardstock, it's very shiny. If I put any of this Wink of Stella and it goes over my lines, because sometimes we color on the lines, on the red foil it dries and you end up with this kind of a foggy look. So I just wipe it with my finger. Now, tip here. I said the tip and I wasn't even following it myself. So if you wipe it with your finger, it's going to go into whatever direction you wipe it. If you wipe it back into the petal, it's fine if you get a little red in there because you're going for red anyways. But here where I've wiped it and I actually went outside the line a little bit, I'm going to have some red there that I'll have to cover up with another color. So always wipe it in rather than out of the area. So I'll do a couple more leaves here and just let you watch me color to give you more opportunity to see what we're doing with the color. So I'm just putting down a layer of red, then I'm going over it with my white, and that's a white Wink of Stella. I'll do that again. And I do this with all the colors, whether it's the green on the leaves, the blue in the sky, the brown on the branch. I'm doing it all the same technique here, where I put down my color and then I go in with the white. And I go over the edge of that color and go into that new area. So I'm dragging that color down. If I find my color is too dark, I can just keep going over it with the white. I'm adding white on top of the color. If you find that it's too light, like this one here is pretty light, you can do another layer. And I do find that this technique works best while your Wink of Stella is quite wet. And that's why I do one petal at a time. While I'm working on this petal, this ink is sitting on top of the glitter for a couple of seconds before it dries. And so while I have that wet ink there, it's just going to blend a little bit quicker and easier. I don't know if I should really call that blending. It's almost like I'm smearing it. Blending sounds more like a technique though, doesn't it? So we'll call this blending. There you have it. I'll do one last one here so you can see it. If you get tired of watching, you can always shut off the video. Hey, I've watched YouTubes too, and sometimes they do get long and boring. Sorry. All right, so you get the idea there. There it is with just one color on there. And here it is with several. And of course, depending how I turn it in the light, you'll see the colors a little differently. So the key, the white Wink of Stella. Use that with any of your colors. I should tell you, okay, so here I've used this with my red. And you might be able to see that on the very tip here, I do have some red ink. To get that off, because if I go to do blue now, I don't want red in it. To get that off, you just take your scratch paper and you can see where the red came off. And now I'm right back to the white again. So do that in between each color. When you're switching from one color to another, just clean that tip off on a scratch of paper and then move on to doing it with your next color. That way you won't transfer colors where you don't want them. I hope you have a lot of fun with this technique. And we do carry several different seasons and designs of these dies that really lend themselves to doing really nice stained glass. Happy crafting. Thanks for watching.